Let's fade that on out. Started the morning off. You know, I had to share something with y'all because I wanted to play the Revolution song with Speech by Arrested Development, and then it reminded me because I hadn't listened to Arrested Development in a while. That Arrested Development had a song about his infatuation and romance, whatever. Let's not even go there. Anyway, first song I played was Sunshine, which is a very peculiar song. But you got to kind of listen to it till the end. He claims he has a message there. You know, that's the problem with liberalism. But I wanted to juxtapose that to the song Revolution, you know, that they made for the soundtrack of Malcolm X. So uh, the evolution of speech as an artist and speech as uh, political positions is an interesting one. One of the most interesting and I think underrated and overlooked artists in hip hop, speech from Arrested Development. But I still appreciate his music, but I can't claim to understand. Sometimes you artistic cats. And some of my best friends, I love saying, whenever somebody says some of my best friends or whatever, you know they're about to say something disparaging about that group. But some of my best friends are artists. And y'all peculiar. I'm always in awe of artists, you know. I'm in awe of artists, but not the same kind of way the masses are. Not really pop artists. I don't mean artists who produce for consumption, but artists who produce for the sake of art and the enrichment of the human experience. I'm always in awe of them, but y'all get peculiar sometimes. So I'm not even going to pass judgment against speech. I just wanted to acknowledge that that song Sunshine existed before I played Revolution. You take it how you want, but I really, really, really love that song Revolution. And when it came out, they was playing it hard in early 90s. NYC, the Fulton Mall, the 40 Acres and the Mule era. Um, but anyway, that was Revolution. And then we started to go a little bit into Can You Hear Me from Speech's first solo album, which is another album I think is a bit of a treasure. Is a treasure that I think we overlook. But anyway, let's proceed with the show. I got a lot I want to share and not very much time to share. So I cannot, I will, what? Let me say it. It's not even funny. I'm serious. But I will not be long, but I must be strong. To quote the late great Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, I will not be long, but I must be strong. I want that to be the new Bro Diallo show. You know, what is it? Our new theme. But anyway, um, today's show is what happens to a revolution deferred, and of course, I'm playing off of Langston Hughes' great poem, A Dream Deferred. And I think um, that Dream Deferred is more accurately stated as a revolution deferred. I think he didn't know what he was talking about. You know. So it's a very, very, very short poem, but it's one of the first poems that I learned. And this poem actually predates Dr. Martin Luther King, in fact. So a lot of times it's kind of funny. Well, it predates his I Have a Dream speech. So black folks been dreaming for a long time, and I ain't gonna say nothing slick about how we need to wake up from the dream. I ain't gonna say nothing slick like that. I'm just saying Dr. King wasn't the first brother with a dream to discuss a dream. But before Dr. King even articulated his dream, he we already had Brother Langston Hughes kind of realize that our dream is deferred. But anyway, he wasn't even talking about a dream in reality. He was actually talking about a revolution deferred. When you read the substance of the sentence, and I'm going to read it and relate that, but before I do that, I don't think I properly, and I don't know if I did. I never know if I did. I never feel like I did. I never felt like any show is a good show. that the Bro Diallo show has ever done, because after every single show, I always come up with a myriad of things that, like, oh, I needed to say this and I didn't make this connection and that connection. And that's the reason for so many rabbit holes and digression, because I always feel like there's so much more I needed to say on any given topic. And I don't want to, belabor a topic, but I don't want to under represent or under articulate the importance of whatever topic or issue. So I feel like every show is a horrible show. But I do have some consolation in that, because when I look at my shows in totality, if you listen to the Bro Diallo show, and over almost creeping up on 300 broadcasts I've done in almost 3 years I've been on the air, not even almost, just over 2 years that I've been on the air, it all kind of strings together. And I'm like, okay, there is some consistent, coherent thoughts coming out. So, I can't pack. I'd like every show to be my final show, because I come on the air, I broadcast, and by the time I walk out the studio, the revolution is going on. Based on a Bro Diallo broadcast has sparked a revolution. But that's unrealistic. And I pride myself on being rational, reality-based, evidence-based. So, that's just my own personal thoughts. But I do need to speak about what I was saying. Monday's show was You Can't Eat Racism, Po-White Politics. And what I wanted to tell, I said that I was going to relate that back to black folks. I stated that Trump has failed his basic voting constituency. Trump has failed poor and working class white people. And his approval ratings, which have been historically lowest approval rating for any sitting president in the history of polling data. We don't have polls on many of the early presidentes, those slave-owning, pedophile, rapist, land-killing, genocidal, Indian murdering founding fathers of America. We don't have polling data. But since they started keeping polls, we find that Trump has some of the lowest approval ratings. The population has some of the lowest, and those are well-deserved low approval ratings. Well-deserved. He's been below Obama, a black man. Now, granted, Obama was a black man who enthusiastically bowed down and served the institutions and agendas of global white domination. Obama didn't have the capacity to be a white supremacist or had the capacity to be a racist, but he had the capacity to serve white aggressors. He had the capacity to advance and legitimize the empire. He had the capacity to demobilize black progressive movements, and even Obama subverted white liberal and progressive movements. Obama was literally a catastrophe for any movements towards justice, anti-war, pro-environment, racial justice, and black liberation, African unification. Obama was a catastrophe because two things happened. One, masses, millions of black people, not just in the United States, but all over the world, said, we got a black president of the United States. And there's only one global superpower. The global hegemon of the United States of America has a black president. Therefore, our job is done. So we had a lot of organizers, a lot of rabble-rousers, a lot of black people who were fighting towards some ill-defined vision of black empowerment. And they felt that Obama was the culmination of all those struggles. Obama was evidence that there was no need anymore for black struggle. Now, there might have been needs for homelessness struggles, women's struggles, gay rights struggles. But as far as black folks, by the time you got a black El Presidente of the empire, it caused a lot of black people to walk away from the struggle or redefine their struggles. Even a lot of the old guard. You even had Minister Louis Farrakhan come out and endorse for Obama. But he's always been a bit of an opportunist, if you don't mind me saying. But you even had other scholars conscious revolutionary scholars that I looked up to, like Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Leonard Jeffries. This is a radical black scholar who was so unapologetic and uncompromising, he used to have to give his lectures wearing a bulletproof vest. Because when he would stand up and give his lectures and reveal hidden history to the masses of the people, to his students, he would get numerous death threats. And he would go to places like Europe and give lectures and tell those people the absolute truth. He stood by, and Dr. Jeffries was a student who sat at the foot of Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and some of the greatest scholars. Even Dr. Jeffries, of all people, came out and endorsed Obama. So Obama, on one half, he turned a lot of people. He turned a lot of people, making them think either the struggle is over or at least certain components of the struggle had been won. And we didn't realize that Obama's election was not evidence of black elevation. It was evidence of white entrenchment. That they were secure enough to say, hey, we could turn the reins of the empire over to a black man. It don't matter because they're so well indoctrinated. They've so well integrated our value system that they don't see any distinction between black and white, up and down, right and wrong, empire and democracy, wealth and riches, ecosystem and economy. But I digress. We're not talking about Obama. All I'm saying is Obama didn't serve his voters either. But Obama's voting public. They're liberals. They're progressives. There were even some radicals. But Trump constituency are white, working class, common background white folks. And these people have over 3 million guns, trillions of bullets, and a pathological sense of insecurity and an even more pathological sense of entitlement. So betraying black folks is one thing, but betraying white folks, that's a whole nother mother. So anyway, Trump, I listed the lies that Trump told. And I don't even call them failures that Trump failed. Now, Obama lied because Obama said he would do things that he was well capable of doing and didn't do them. So he was a liar. I mean, he was a failure and a liar. But Trump was telling white folks things that he absolutely could not do. Now, number one, make America great again was a slogan that white folks, to this day, they love it. But the average white person knows nothing of white history, European history. They don't even know basic American history. They don't even know American contemporary history. Most white people don't even know that the vast majority of white people were impoverished and uneducated up until the New Deal, the post-World War II era. Before that, you had what was called the Gilded Age, and the Gilded Age ran into the great economic collapse. And the vast majority of white people, number one, were brand new immigrants. They hadn't even been here. The average white family hasn't been here more than 3 or 4 generations. Black people have been here more than 4 to 5 times longer generationally than the average white person. So an average white person whose family came over from Ellis Island in the 1800s to the early 1900s will come in the face of a black person who's been here since the 1600s and say, go back to Africa. You still got a little Scottish funk on you. You still got an Irish potato famine funk on you. You still got some collapse. There's a whole batch of white folks that just got here after the fall of the Berlin Wall in the 1990s. Dang. White folks come over here with some Italian fascist funk. Come over here running from Italian fascists in the 1940s. But we'll look at an African who's been here since whose people have been here since the 1400s and say, go back to Africa. They're stupid. They don't know. They don't know any better. You got Melania Trump, who hasn't been here one generation. Barron Trump is an anchor baby. And Barron Trump will be walking around America talking about this is my country, when he still got that Slovakian funk on him. You know, it's really crazy. But don't bother telling them their history. They don't give a damn about the facts. Don't think they just don't know better. For a long time, black people think, well, if white folks don't know, then let's tell them. You can't tell these people, can't tell them nothing. They like Kanye. You saying something, you can't tell me nothing. So anyway, these white people have been lied to by Trump. They have been deceived by Trump. Trump told them he was going to end the foreign wars, and he was basically going to make America great again. And by make America great again, they don't even understand that the only time America has really been great for them was with the New Deal era, the New Deal reforms, the WPA programs, the GI Bill, the suburban expansion. So they don't understand that white people became great as a result of one of the largest welfare handout begging government initiated socialist programs in the history of the Western world. White people became great as a result of a massive socialist program. FDR was such a socialist that the elites at the time, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, the Coke precursors to the Koch family, they wanted to overthrow the government. They wanted to have a coup d'etat. And they tried to hire a man by the name of Smedley Butler, who was a general. They tried to hire Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated Marine generals of that era, to overthrow the government and to march on the White House and unseat Roosevelt, because they felt that he was bringing socialism to America. And Smedley Butler ran to Congress and snitched. He was a whole ass snitch, but one of the greatest soldiers, one of the greatest Americans ever born. And so most white people think that their wealth and well-being is not the result of welfare. It's not the result of set-asides. It's not the result of handouts. It's not the result of racial preference, but it's the result of their own individual hard work. And it's not true. So they want to go back to an era called the Gilded Age, because the Gilded Age was a time of open racism, overt open racism. A man by the name of Woodrow Wilson was in office, and he resegregated Washington, D.C. and the federal government. He was an overt racist. He was a warmonger, and he was an elitist. He was a white aggressor who also wanted to expand the American empire. And a lot of white people truly believe that they will be millionaires if the government gets out of their way, even though it is the government that's propping them up. And they want the government to deregulate the economy, deregulate the environment, deregulate education, and allow private industries to own education, and religious cults and like the Mormons and what's the other the dispensationalist evangelical churches. They want the church and private industry to take over education, because they've been told since Ronald Reagan took over that the government is in their way. The average white person living in a trailer park believes that the reason they're not a billionaire is because of all the government regulations. And so they vote for politicians who promise to remove regulations and to remove taxation. They don't understand that taxation is a redistributive method to take money from people who have money to give money to people who don't have money. That's what taxes do for white people. And white people are like, stop taking money from all these rich white people, because when I become a rich white man, I don't want the government to take my money even though they don't have money. So Trump has tricked these white people, has played on their stupidity, and now the chickens have come home to roost. And so there's only one thing Trump has, and Trump understands this intimately. There's only one thing Trump has. Trump has a Trump card. Trump says, I can't help white people to reestablish them economically. I can't. I don't have any solutions for them. I don't have any solutions for these wars. I said I would defeat Al Qaeda. I said I'd stop with the going over to spread democracy. I can't. The only thing Trump has been able to do masterfully is to feed the white psychopathology of racism and racial aggression. So white people might still be struggling. They still might be smoked out on opioids. They still might see their overall stake in the economy diminishing. But as long as Trump can say, listen, you can see me abuse, dehumanize, and even murder black and brown and Muslim and Hindu and Koreans. You can see me unrelentlessly attack non-white people. And I don't care if it's a Latina congresswoman or African-American civil rights icon or a whole shithole country in the third world. I will give you, average white voter, a daily dose of racism and racial validation, because that's all Trump has for the average white worker. Will it be enough? I don't know. It seems like it has been enough. He's still holding those rallies. He hasn't given the white folks their jobs back. He hasn't given the white folks their money. Remember, he promised that he was going to expand Medicare. Remember, Social Security. Remember, he said that they were all going to have health care. He was promising, if you go back to 2016 and you look at what Trump was saying during the primary, he literally stole Bernie Sanders' entire platform. Bernie Sanders says, I will implement democratic socialism to bring you these benefits. Trump says, I will ratchet up, I will deregulate the government and ratchet up capitalism to give you these benefits. Trump and Bernie were promising the same things but they had told the public that they were going to use diametrically opposed methods to come to the same end. Trump totally bit. He was a sucker MC. He stole Bernie's whole platform. Look at everything that Bernie said he was going to come through with, and Trump was saying he'd do it and put a cherry on top of it. And of course, Trump's methodology was contrary to what he was promising. You can't deregulate and you can't lower taxes. At the same time, you increase services and offer greater protection to the public. Only way you can give services to the public and protect the public from environmental pollution or exploitation from large companies and monopolies is to increase taxes on the wealthy and to increase oversight and regulation. Trump was literally like saying, my method for birth control is to ejaculate into a woman when she's most fertile. I'm going to do the exact opposite of what I should be doing to get the outcome that I'm promising. And white folks were like, yeah, yeah. So Trump said, I failed economically, socially, politically, but I can win the culture war. So Trump, we're heading into the fall. Trump is going to start up talking about Merry Christmas. Trump made the claim last year and the year before that he saved Christmas. And he's going to attack people who say happy holidays in order to have some respect for people with varying cultures and views. And so Trump is going to start talking this Christmas stuff. Trump said the poor brothers and sisters in the Bahamas are a bunch of drug dealers and they can't come into the country. Go back to your island and drown or die of cholera and the other tropical diseases that come about when the systems collapse. Trump is now talking more nonsense about black radicals, black identity extremists. He's still talking that nonsense about MS-13. He's still torturing and murdering and raping refugees at the border. He's threatening North Korea. He's still funding the attacks on Yemen with money and arms to Saudi Arabia, the proxies. He's going to Israel and helping Israel to continue and ultimately complete its genocide against the Palestinian people. He's defunding aid organizations that bring some level of relief to victims of Western imperialism. Trump is undermining the negotiations in Afghanistan to end that invasion, that war of aggression. Trump is all he has left for the white masses is racism. And he's going to ratchet it up going into the election. He's going to ratchet up racism because that's all he has. And Trump is gambling that white folks will try to eat racism. They don't have adequate food, clothing, housing. White poverty is rising, and the few white folks that got money left, they're spending it on opiates. And he's going to say, hey, clutch your Bible, clutch your gun, and embrace your whiteness. And it might get him over. It might do it. It might give him enough white votes. But what Trump is going to do is try to ride into the White House on the backs of black people and other vulnerable minority population. So he's going to try to spark an attack. He's going to try to spark more racial conflict, as if you have to start racial conflict because there's already inherent racial conflicts, but he's going to try to throw gasoline on that racial fire. And Trump just might pull it off. Because even though I named Monday's show You Can't Eat Racism, apparently white folks are going to try damn hard to eat racism. And throughout the U.S. history, white people have shown that their racism, they have more loyalty to their racist delusions than they do have to the very democracy. That's why they fought the Civil War. There was times in this country where white senators would get up and speak about abolishing slavery. And they would get beat on the floor by other senators. And whenever there's been a conflict between so-called democratic values or constitutional law and white racism, white people have always chosen racism over their most cherished tradition. So what that means when they see that black people or other unworthy minorities or religious minorities, Muslims or even Catholics, begin to take advantage of constitutional rights, they will violate the Constitution to maintain the racial hierarchy. So even though the white folks tell me, if I don't love America, I can leave it, they don't even know what America is. They don't understand anything about what America truly is from a bureaucratic or legislative or even a basic, accurate historical level. To them, when they say love America or leave it, what they really mean is bow to white domination and submit to white aggression or leave. Because they don't give a damn about America. They look at Trump violate the U.S. Constitution and congressional and presidential norms every single day. They see Trump violate everything from the First Amendment to the Emoluments Clause every single day. These white people who say they love America don't give a damn about America. They only love America to the extent that America serves their racist delusions. The moment America no longer directly serves its racist delusion, they will come out and water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants. And all that rhetoric. They will tear this nation down because they believe that this nation is nothing more than a spaceship, a vehicle to drive forward white domination and white aggression and all other white delusions. And the most patriotic Americans who fly the American flag don't give a damn about America. To them, those are symbols of white power. And the moment any non-white person begins to make advances by the game they set the rules to, They say, hey, black people, you have to play this game. Fine, I play that game and I start to succeed or win at that game, and they flip over the damn table. We didn't want to play the game in the first place. We start keeping pace, they change up the tempo. So that's all I wanted to say. Trump is going to use black people as a prop. He's going to use us, provoke us, goad us, attack us, dehumanize us, not because he gives a damn, but because that's all he has to offer the white masses for their votes. That's all he has to offer white folks. Everything else he promised white people, aside from racism and attacking vulnerable minorities, everything else he's promised white people, he's failed to deliver on. So all he got is whooping on us. So get ready. And don't fall for the okie doke, black people. Don't be reactionary. We should understand this. And we should come up with intelligent ways to anticipate and prepare and deny him his one, quote unquote, and I hate to say it, pun intended, deny Trump his Trump card. Continuing on, there's something else I wanted. Trump fired John Bolton. And I did a Q&A last night, and people wanted me to talk about Trump firing John Bolton. And some people are celebrating, because if you don't know who John Bolton is, John Bolton emerged to prominence most recently under the George W. Bush administration. He was the architect of the Iraqi invasion. He was the architect in the post 9/11 world of the war on terror, one of the architects. He is a warmonger. He is one of the co-signers on something that is called Project for a New American Century, or PNAC for short. PNAC was the white America agenda to have what is called full spectrum dominance. After the fall of the Soviet Union, white men in America, wealthy white men, said there is no more bipolar world. The bipolar world means you had two poles of power on opposite ends of the economic and political spectrum. You had democratic capitalist America, and you had totalitarian communist Russia. Now, none of that's true, but these people, they live in lies. They live in lies. America wasn't completely democratic, and Russia wasn't communist, but hey, when white folks give themselves titles, we have to call them the titles they give themselves, or they won't give us jobs. So if he said, I'm King Dr. God, then you say, hello, Mr. White King Dr. God. Y'all hiring today? But anyway, they like giving themselves fanciful titles that have no grounding in reality. But I digress. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, they said we're the only superpower. We're the only superpower. There is no challenge to American hegemony. Capitalism won. And they said this was, quote unquote, the end of history. Back in 92, they said that the fall of the Soviet Union would be the end of history because there will be no more grand changes or upheavals. This system will stand until the end of time. And they might be right, because the end of human time might be coming very soon. So to the end of time, no more radicals, no more communists, no more anarchists, no more non-alignment movements. We're going to have liberal democracy and capitalism. Free market capitalism, liberal democracy will now be the permanent system for all societies all over the world. Never mind that the largest, most populous country in the world still identified as communist, China, but they're not white, so who cares what they say? This is the white man's reality. So they came up with this thing called a Project for a New American Century, where they wanted to say, now that the United States is the only superpower in the world, we will never allow another challenge to our hegemony to rise. We'll never let another Russia rise up. We'll never let another independent source of sovereign economic or military power to ever rise up. That America will dominate the global economy and dominate the global military infrastructure for the rest of all time. That was the Project for a New American Century, or what they call the New World Order. George H.W., the father of George Bush, who took over, the first president elected in the post-Soviet, the post-bipolar world, came up with what he called the 1,000 points of light, the New World Order. And he promised all of America and all of the world what he called a peace dividend. Because he said with the peace dividend meant that since we no longer had to fight the Cold War, since the Russians were no longer knocking at our door and trying to overthrow our freedom and democracy, we didn't have to spend all this money on warfare. So all the money we spent on nukes and Trident submarines and stealth bombers and aircraft carriers, the trillions of dollars that went into the military can now go into social programs, can now go into infrastructure, can now go into research and development of helpful technologies instead of technologies made to kill people. And that's what he said. And this will be the 1,000 points of life. And America will be a beacon to the world, where they'll see how you can create a just democracy that gives humans opportunities to reach their full potential. This was the post-Soviet rhetoric when capitalism was taking over the world. Now that the whole world is capitalist and the whole world will be democratic, even though most people lived under a non-capitalist, but I continue to digress. So this is what they were told in this world with the PNAC. And John Bolton was like, that's some good rhetoric, but the reality was America was going to turn the whole world into colonial subjects. Every single government across the world would have to come in and align itself with the economic interests of the United States. The dollar will be the global currency. You got these white racists talking about one world government. They want a one world currency. And they thought that Alex Jones, Trump's homie, thought that the UN and foreigners were going to bring a one world government to America, when these stupid ass white men didn't understand that it was America taking a one world government and a one world currency to the rest of the world. These white men literally, from Alex Jones and Ralph Epperson and all of these New World Order Illuminati nutbags, and a lot of black men started talking this nonsense too, really believed that what America was doing to the rest of the world, that the rest of the world was going to come and do to America. It's crazy. And I was around back then. I was in college in those days, and I'm like, wow. Nobody want to listen to Bro Diallo. Not even now. But I digress. So anyway, John Bolton was an architect of this. And Trump, if you go back and remember, he ran and said that George Bush and Daddy Bush were two of the most incompetent statesmen ever. That they were stupid, they made a lot of mistakes, and he would fix all of their mistakes. He insulted George H.W. Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, and George W. Bush, the son. He insulted their ideology, he insulted their administrations. But then when he got elected, he appointed all of their people, including John Bolton. And so John Bolton came back, and the first thing John Bolton wanted to do was provoke a war with Iran. He wanted to further entrench the U.S. in Iraq, Afghanistan. He wanted to ratchet up the attack on Libya. Not on Libya. Libya had fallen. Obama took care of Libya. On Yemen. And he also wanted to ratchet up things in Syria. He wanted boots on the ground. And North Korea. He wanted to stop Trump from playing footsies with North Korea and bring back the hammer on North Korea. He was a bloodthirsty warmonger. And Trump, here's the thing about Trump. Trump is a kleptocrat, meaning that Trump has no ideology. Trump will advance whoever he thinks will get him paid. Whatever policy or ideas they think he would get him paid, he will do it. Trump will come out tomorrow and put forth the Black Panther 10-point plan if he thinks it will get him paid. He's a kleptocrat. All he knows is consumption. And people like that are, I hate to get metaphorical and metaphysical on y'all, but Trump is empty inside. You notice that people that relentlessly pursue the mass accumulation of things, fiat currency, young model, softcore porn, wives like Melania, he's empty inside. So he just tries to fill that hole with money. And the more he gets, the more he desires, because it's not a healthy situation. He's a narcissist and he's a kleptocrat. So Trump has all these people with all these divergent ideologies tugging at him. And they come and tell Trump, you're great. Your hands are huge. Your hair is beautiful. Your skin is glowing. And you're the smartest man in the world. And he says, okay, come on into the Oval Office. What do you want? They come and compliment Trump. And then they have to convince Trump that what they want to do will somehow enrich him. So Trump has all these people who hate each other. He has the Zionists and the Nazis. He literally has the Jewish militants and Nazis on his platform. So one day he comes out and says, we're going to move the capital of the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. And we're going to give Israel all these weapons. And we're going to help Israel to protect itself from the Palestinians. And we're going to defund the Palestinian charitable organizations. He comes out with all this pro-Zionist policies. And then the next day, he's defending Nazis. Oh, they're good people. And he's going to attack Antifa. Because if you are against Antifa, then you're pro-fa. You're pro-fascist. If you don't support anti-fascism, then you are a fascist. So he comes out in defense of fascists, of neo-Nazis who hate Jews. But one day, the Zionists will walk into his office and say, hey, Trump, you can be the savior of Israel. And there's so much money. You can build a Trump Tower in Jerusalem. So he's like, a Trump Tower in Jerusalem, you say. So he comes out with pro-Jerusalem policies. Then the next day they come and say, listen, white America loves you. When you go to a Trump rally, those are all neo-Nazi, racist Klansmen. So he's like, and they are the ones who are going to buy those MAGA hats and buy those Trump commemorative cufflinks. They're the only people willing to go stay in a tacky-ass Trump resort. So it's like, oh, the white racists, the fascists support me, you say. So then he comes up and with some favorable press and some support for the Nazis. Then he goes to the globalists. And the people who say, listen, we want to go around the world and we want to spread democracy. And he sits and talks to Betsy DeVos and her brother. And they say, we have private military firms and we want to go all over the world and spread democracy. And we want to go into Yemen and we want to privatize warfare. And we want to, and he's like, oh, fine. Yeah, that's great. What do I sign? But then you have, after the globalists, here come the protectionists. And say, we got to put America first. End all this free trade. End all these foreign incursions. It's not our responsibility to take democracy to the world. And if you just focus on America, then you can get paid. He's like, okay, where do I sign? So Trump, one day he's fascist. One day he's Zionist. One day he's neo-Nazi. The next day he's a freaking protectionist. Next day he's a globalist. One day he's talking about the monopolies and the big business and how big business is going to have to learn to bow to the will of the people. And he's going to break up these big monopolies and break up these media companies. And the next day he's approving mergers, the biggest mergers in the history of corporate America. Trump stands for nothing. Trump will literally go to a redneck racist rally in Alabama and then that same night be sitting across from what's his name, Steve Harvey, and what other and Kanye West beatboxing for ASAP Rock while ASAP Rocky freestyles over a Trump beatbox. He mingles with colored folks. He'll mingle with white folks. He don't care about nothing. Nothing is real to Trump. So that's why you try to look at the White House and like, what the hell is going on here? That's what's going on. A bunch of people with money come and convince Trump to advance their ideas. And Trump has no integrity. He stands for nothing. He doesn't even, his only ideology is more. His only philosophy is more. So and Trump is not very smart. So you don't even have to actually enrich him. You just got to convince him that what you're going to do has the strong potential to enrich him. One minute he's the most pro-American patriot, and the next minute he's sitting on the lap of Putin, telling U.S. secrets to you, America's enemies. And I'm not saying this, I'm not even talking about Russiagate. The CIA literally had to extract a U.S. spy out of Russia because Trump was snitching on his own intelligence agencies to Russian officials. You know, so that's what happens when you get a kleptocrat. They stand for nothing. They'll rock with anybody. But it ain't just Trump. You know, that makes me think of Jay-Z. If you look at Jay-Z's career, Jay-Z's been everything from a gangster rapper to a pimp to a conscious pro-black revolutionary. He went from calling himself Jehovah to Jay Guevara. Jay-Z don't stand for nothing. Jay-Z will pimp your mama or fund a battered woman's shelter. It don't make him no difference. As long as it brings wealth and builds up his brand. He's not a businessman. He's a businessman. And even when they do right, they doing wrong. But we, the masses, tend to fall for it. So that's Jay-Z too. He's not, I mean, that's that narcissistic, capitalistic, parasitic mentality. You know, and they talk about, oh, Trump, I hate immigrants. And half his damn wives were immigrants. That man don't stand for a damn thing. Don't think, yeah, Trump is a racist when racism pays. You don't like Trump being a racist? Give him some money. Pay him. He'll stop being racist. You know, you got enough money, Trump will come and put on a dashiki and come host your local Kwanzaa celebration. I promise you. He stands for nothing but getting money. And that's why they want him in office. That's why they might put him back in office. Because the elites say, look, we don't like him. The elites hate him. Even, like I said, Fox News hated Trump. But they know if we put Trump in office, we get whatever we want. We get whatever we want with Trump because he stands for nothing. At least Obama was a neoliberal. Obama had an ideology. Obama was at least nothing else consistent with his core ideology. Trump has no ideology. You can't really predict what Trump is going to do. And that's why people, when you say, oh, Trump's a racist, Trump is definitely racist. He's racist for pay. But Trump can kick it with black people. He used to hang out with Mike Tyson and Don King. He was around colored folks. He collected colored folks. He don't stand for a damn thing. And he's really, really stupid. But he's a useful idiot. Trump is a useful idiot. If Hillary Clinton had got in, it would have been a little more effort for the elites to manipulate and dictate to her. Because she has her own agenda too. Trump has no agenda. Trump has no plan except to get money. And those are the type of values that these gangster rappers promote to black people. But it's really the most toxic, inhumane thing to push. But let's move on from Trump. I've talked about Trump way too much. But let's get to this. I want to share some excerpts and some more music. Today's show is called A Revolution Deferred. And A Revolution Deferred goes off of the poem A Dream Deferred. So I'm going to play real quick that poem. Or no, maybe I should read it. I actually found a recording of Langston Hughes saying his poem. And I like Langston Hughes' voice. But maybe I'll play some other spoken word, Langston Hughes spoken word materials. Because he actually recorded quite a bit of his materials. But I'm going to read this. Because today's show, again, is named A Revolution Deferred. Which I think was a more appropriate title. But listen to this. Dream Deferred. By Langston Hughes. I'm not going to read I'm just going to read it. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Now, I've always really, really liked this poem. Number one, because it's short as hell. So as a young man coming up in high school and college, and I had to do, literature and African American studies. But this and that poem, there's a poem by the sister called All Bob, No Marley. I really like that poem. But there's another poem, If We Must Die by Claude McKay. But anyway, this poem talks about not really a dream deferred. Because what the hell is a dream? The dream he's referring to, if you look at the context in which he wrote it in the 1950s, is the dream of black liberation. And what does black liberation entail? Revolution. And this dream is this poem is so unbelievably accurate. When your dream, when you have such a grand scheme, when you have this great thing you wish to achieve, and you essentially are derailed, you fail at it. What happens to it? Because the thing is, when you want something, when you're in a state of oppression, and you make a play for liberation, and you fail to secure the liberation, it's almost impossible to go back to the status quo of oppression. If you're on a plantation and you're enslaving, and you make a run for freedom, and you get a little taste of freedom, you get close enough to freedom where you can see it, but they catch you and bring you back. Even though you got to go back to what you've been doing for all your life, you go back to doing the same work you've been doing all your life, it's different to you. And it don't even have to be something as dramatic. You work a job. You've been working all your life, and you decide, I'm going to venture out and become an entrepreneur. And you get out there and you set up your business. And even though it's a struggle, you wake up every day knowing that you are speaking to your own agenda, speaking to your own interests, acting according to your own creativity and ambition. And the business completely collapsed. So you got to go back to your job. Even though you're doing the same thing you might have been doing for the last 20 years, it's different. It chews at you. So you take that type of feeling, which I've had that feeling. I've started my own business and had to go back to work. More than one time. Serial entrepreneur. And it hits you different. And so what happens? Do you dry up inside? Do you just die inside? You say, hey, this is my fate. I will be a proletariat. I'll be a worker all my life. Does it fester? What happens to that energy, to that fervor? What I would say is really clever that he would ask those questions. Does it dry up like a raisin? Does it fester like a sore? Does it rot? Does it sag and weigh you down, or does it explode? Well, we know that when a dream is deferred, all those things happen. Often to the exact same person or to the exact same community of people. And the reason I'm talking about that is because think to the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. South Africans who have suffered from poverty are seeing foreign investors like Nigerians come to their country and prosper. So they go and attack the Nigerians. They've even set some of these people on fire. But it's not just the prosperous Nigerians who are coming to create jobs and take their jobs. The educated and affluent Nigerians who see greater opportunity in South Africa than they do in Nigeria go there, and they're seen as the other. They're seen as foreign on the African continent. But also, you remember back in the early 2000s, when Mugabe implemented his land reform, and he essentially went to the white farmers and said, break yourselves, fool, I'm taking the land back. And as a result of him taking land back from the white farmers, over 80% of Zimbabwe's arable land, fertile farmland, was controlled by white colonizers. Well, more than 3 decades after the decolonization movement. After Zimbabwe, quote unquote, got liberated, it was not a financial liberation, decolonization. It was not even a political decolonization. It was what John Henry Clark called Zimbabwe got flag independence. They changed the country name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. They put a black figurehead at the top, Mugabe. Well, they didn't. He put himself there, but still. They changed the name, they got a new flag, and it went back to business as usual. Foreign extraction and white domination of the economy. And they were like, yeah, you white folks can sit in parliament and play politics. We gonna run the economy. We gonna control the natural resources. And Mugabe, it took him almost 3 decades to get around and say, wait a minute, what good is political liberation without economic justice and economic reparations and liberation? Who cares if I control my country's government if I don't control my country's natural resources and economic structure? So he got hip to that. But unfortunately, he got hip to that long after he became corrupted by riches. He became corrupted by power. He was no longer accountable to the people he fought for, he bled for. So of course the land reform was mismanaged, greatly mismanaged, and there was a lot of powerful pro-black rhetoric coming, but very poor black management and execution of the land reform. So many, and also, you know, you take land from white people in Africa, you're going to get the attention of the United States and Western Europe and Israel. So the colonial powers, the former and neo-colonial powers, moved against Zimbabwe. They collapsed Zimbabwe's economy. They set up sanctions against Zimbabwe. They wanted to bring Zimbabwe to heel, bring them to heel, to quote Hillary Clinton. And Mugabe was in no way prepared. And what did he do in response to the political warfare and political threats against Zimbabwe? He had more rhetoric. And he would call the prime minister all kinds of names. He would make fun of America and call them sissies and fags, and talked about how Africa is going to withstand and how Africa can endure. He had a lot of strong rhetoric, but no plans, no policies, no resources, no agendas to counter the counterattack. And so, while his wife was going on shopping sprees in Rio de Janeiro, $1 million shopping sprees, and he was going on, to buy custom Bentleys and Rolls Royces, the people of Zimbabwe were starving. So they said, we can't make a way here. Even though he took the land, because of the embargoes, we can't buy the industrial seeds, we can't buy we can't secure the farm equipment, we can't secure the things we need to build up our agricultural economy. So where did they go? They went to South Africa as economic refugees. They say there's more opportunities in South Africa because it was the longest standing colonial state. South Africa was the last country, sub-Saharan African country, to throw off the shackles of European colonialism. And as a result of that, the white South Africa had partnerships with Israel, the UK, the European Union, and the United States were flooding money into white South Africa to prop up the last white empire direct settler colony on the African continent. As a result, white South Africa had the largest economy in the entire African continent, and they also had the only nuclear weapon. It was the only nuclear power on the entire African continent. So, of course, when black people took over, first thing Mandela did was surrender the nuke. So you can't have you black people having nukes. That's for white folks and Asian folks, I guess. But no nukes for Africans. I would have kept that nuke. You couldn't have got, man, you would have had to pry that. I'd be like a redneck. You got to pry this nuke from my cold, dead fingers. I'm anti-nuclear. But hey, I'll give up mine when you give up yours. But anyway, that's a whole nother fantasy. But Mandela came to power. And Mandela promised the West that he would not interfere with the neoliberal economics. He immediately brought South Africa under the World Bank and IMF structural adjustment programs, and he got with the program. He sold Africa out. The dream of a liberated black South Africa was deferred. And then they had this disgusting display overseen by the Bishop Desmond Tutu of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And they went to white South Africans and say, all of the atrocities you committed against our people will be absolved if you simply come before the world and confess your crimes. And you had white men, white police officers says, yes, I took an electric cattle prod and I stuck it in a woman's vagina and I turned it on. I took a pair of pliers and I crushed this young man's testicles because he refused to be treated like a subhuman subject in his own land. I raped, I mutilated, I murdered. And Desmond Tutu would sit there on the panel and say, very well, very good, sir. You're free to go. And it was line after line. They had South African scientists come and sit before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and say, yes, we put fertility destroying chemicals in the black water supply. We tip cigarettes and liquor bottles with anthrax. We put asbestos. We consciously infected the Africans with diseases. We consciously contaminated their crops and their livestock. We used our scientific skill to commit the greatest atrocities that have never been seen since the Nazis scientists were in power. And Desmond Tutu sat there on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and said, very well, sir, you're free to go. But then they did something worse in the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They did something even worse. They said to the black freedom fighters, you got to come confess your crimes. They said to the black guerrilla fighters, you got to come confess your crimes. They said to the people who fight and died and took up arms for the liberation of South Africa, the black Africans, they said, you come confess your crimes to the Reconciliation Commission too. So you had a black man who was fighting for his country to liberate his people from some of the most bloodthirsty, racist infiltrators, invaders, aliens, and had to sit there and say, yeah, I took up arms. That white man who owned that farm, who was raping the young girls who worked his farm, I took up a gun and I blew his damn brains out. Yeah, I went to the police station where they were taking our people in like Stephen Biko and torturing them to death. I set that police station on fire. And do you apologize for your crimes? Do you acknowledge your crimes? And they put them on the same level, the freedom fighters on the same level as the colonizers. And you ain't got to take my word for it. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it was written, it was videotaped, it is well documented. Now, you can't get a dream more deferred. The dream of African liberation was deferred. But even though, so let's go back to the Zimbabwean economic refugees. They went into Africa and the South Africans said, yo, we cannot handle these people. Because just like in Zimbabwe, after the decolonization movement, there was no transfer of resources, there was no transfer of land, there was no economic compensation to the people, and all the people who had amassed billions of dollars as a result of the apartheid system got to keep their money. So it's like I go out and rob a bank, and all of y'all money is in the bank, and I take all of y'all money from the bank, and then they come to me and say, listen, do you confess to robbing the bank? Yes, I did rob the bank. Are you sorry? Yes, I'm hella sorry. Will you promise not to rob the bank again? I can't say that, but, we'll see what happens. And so they say, okay, you get to keep all of your money. You get to keep every dime. And then they come to you and say, well, even though you don't get any money back, you have the opportunity to freely earn more money and put it in the bank. And we can somewhat promise you that he won't do it again. So you working, you got to build up from zero, and I get to keep everything I kept from you, and we're equals. Take this quote. There is nothing more unjust than equality between unequals. There is nothing more unjust than having equality, treating unequals equally. So anyway, what happened since the South Africans had the symbol of Obama, I call him Obama. That's a Freudian as we can get, Freudian slipper. As you had Mandela come to power, and I was in New York City when he came to New York, and he had literally a ticker tape parade, and there were black people trembling and crying in the streets. I came up in the 80s and 90s through high school and college, and there wasn't one black person that didn't own an African medallion, an ANC medallion. And we had ANC buttons and ANC necklaces, and we say, free South Africa, free South Africa. And we were boycotting everything we could boycott. We ain't drinking Coca-Cola. I remember Stephanie Mills went to South Africa to perform, and when she came back to Philly to do a concert after performing in South Africa, the brothers ran up on the concert hall and said, shut it down. You can't come here and perform if you went to perform in South Africa. It was global solidarity on that. And so when Mandela got out, Mandela went to prison for running guns. He was smuggling in weapons from the Russians and the Cubans to take up armed rebellion against the apartheid state. And so Mandela sold out. I don't know what they did to that man on Robben Island. Mandela should have came out of prison and went to and retired to a garden. He had no business becoming a head of state. He was one of the most treasonous head of states in all of African history. I have no respect for Mandela. It really sickens me to see y'all putting up Mandela next to Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. In fact, the only murals that I see, when y'all paint Mandela next to Obama, that's cool. But I don't know why y'all got to throw Malcolm X and Dr. King in there too. That ain't right. Because Mandela died a sellout. He had a great legacy, and he totally collapsed his own legacy. He sold out. He deferred the dream. So anyway, you got to know this history if you want to understand what's happening in South Africa. You had revolutionary fervor. You had just outrage. And the South African people, year after year, generation after generation, have been denied justice. So what happened when revolution, when justice, when dreams are deferred? Do they dry up like a raisin in the sun? Do they fester like a sore and run? Do they stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like syrupy sweet? Maybe they sag like a heavy load, or does it explode? In South Africa, you got everything. If you look at post-apartheid South Africa, and again, just like in the United States, in Africa, the oppressed people confuse proximity with power. If you got people in power and then you remove the barriers, and I get close proximity to those in power, I get to work alongside them, go to school alongside them, buy homes alongside them, swim alongside them, drink out of the same fountain with them, and drink and eat at the same restaurants as they do. If I'm close to the people in power, then that by default means I'm power. By the distributive transverse property, I too have power. That is not what it is. Power is not proximity. Getting closer to your oppressor does not grant you any inherent power. They had anti-apartheid there, we had desegregation here, and what happened? We started to turn on each other. All that righteous rage, that revolutionary fervor that we were supposed to use to bring down our oppressor, we got this false image of integration and freedom, so we started to feed off of and cannibalize each other. And it ain't just killing, like I said, the Zimbabwean economic refugees were some of the first mass attacks over a decade ago, but these were poor people. You don't care. Now, wealthy businessmen that are getting attacked in South Africa, everybody's up in arms. But I didn't see this same uprising, but the documentations are out there. The photos, the graphic photos of people being burned alive. They beat them to a bloody pulp and pile up tires on them and set the tires ablaze, necklacing them. Those are treatments that used to be only preserved for traders. Black traders and white oppressors would get the necklace. But if you look at the degradation after South African apartheid was betrayed, the anti-apartheid movement, the Black Revolution was deferred in South Africa. One of the first things the brothers and sisters started doing was going up on these plantations and killing the white farmers. They were killing hundreds and hundreds of white farmers. They would wait for the sun to go down. They would take long knives and machetes and cut up there and cut the throats of the white people's necks. He said, we're not going for this. The revolution was still going to go. And what did Mandela do? Mandela used all of his resources to attack the other Africans. And then the African miners and the African worker class said, no, we're not going to go for this liberal reform. We want revolution, not reform. And what did the new president do? What did Zuma sent the African military to gun down African protesters. And the black-controlled South African government started treating Africans the same way the white government did. Repression, surveillance, murder, mass incarceration, infiltration of organizations, youth and political organizations. They did it in Obama. The white man took over the reins of power and acted just like the damn white man. And so even the militant labor struggle and the underground guerrilla struggle was subverted by black men in power protecting the white power structure. And so what? That's another dream deferred. So you had the anti-apartheid revolution was deferred, just to use that, subverted, betrayed by Mandela. And then they tried to have another groundswell of revolution from militant labor to guerrilla warfare, and that was suppressed. So what happened? It collapsed onto itself. And South Africa went from being a militant state for under militant revolutionary African struggle to being the rape capital of the world, where it started to have an epidemic of rape. The people started to cannibalize themselves. Go look up the statistics. Following the failure or the deferment of the Black liberation struggle, South Africans started to rape and prey upon each other. Vicious, violent gangs started to emerge. Cannibalized. Sound familiar? And look at what happened after the Black liberation, Black power struggle was upended by COINTELPRO in America. Look at what happened. And so then they had an influx of economic refugees from Zimbabwe and other parts. A few Rhodesians after the Rwandan, so-called Rwandan fratricide, not genocide, but the Rwandan fratricide that was overseen by South African white mercenaries, participated in by mercenary troops, white mercenary Afrikaans troops. It's a whole nother discussion. So you look and you see that the movement was subverted. Africans started to cannibalize themselves. They had an epidemic of rape and gang violence. And then foreigners came, quote unquote foreigners. Your brother is now seen as a foreigner. Zimbabweans came, escaping famine and lack of opportunity in Zimbabwe because of the mismanagement of the land reform. And what happens? They started, okay, now we got another target. Because we explode, we rot, we dried up, our hope is gone. So they start to attack the Zimbabweans and lynch and run out the Zimbabweans. And after that, they find Nigerians. Somebody's got to get it. Violence, when there is injustice, there will be violence. And there's only two types of violence. There is ascending violence or descending violence. You either attack the people on the top who are oppressing you, or you attack the people below you, and further in what I call compounding oppression and compounding exploitation. So the only way to stop this nonsense is to have a proper revolution, to reinstitute the Pan-African revolution. That's the only way to stop the violence here in America too. Here in Chicago, you had one of the most productive and vibrant Black liberation struggles in the entire country, led by Chairman Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And they subverted that revolution. They deferred the Black revolution here in Chicago. And now Chicago is synonymous with gang violence and tragic homicides of young Black people. Same thing in Los Angeles, the Bay Area, California is where the Black Panther Party was founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. And subverted. Some of the greatest freedom fighters we ever had. Little Bobby Hutton, Geronimo Jajaga Pratt came out of there. And what happened? That revolution was deferred. And then we started to cannibalize each other through crime and exploitation and predation. And now we got fantasies that the gangs are now our fighting force. So this isn't unique to South Africa. It might take some different forms on the surface, but at the core of it, it's the same thing. African people, if we don't have revolution and we don't end oppression, we're going to end up preying upon and attacking each other. And we'll either attack each other on the street, shooting each other down and beating each other in the street, or
The few of us who elevate to positions of authority like Obama and Jay-Z and Oprah will become the parasites and the overseers. And this is not a modern phenomenon. Go read The Wretched of the Earth. He talks about in The Wretched of the Earth. And it's not just a uniquely black phenomenon. Go read the book Gorillas. Look at the Palestinian struggle. Before the first and second intifada, when the Palestinians were overthrown by the Israelis and they had failed attempts to gain their land, the Palestinians started to prey on and cannibalize each other. And it wasn't until Yasser Arafat returned and got other Palestinian expats and scholars and technicians and educated elite Palestinians to come and say, let's lead our people to freedom. And the moment they started their second and third intifada, internal violence gets reduced when you start to attack your true enemies. Brothers with the AKs and the 9Ms need to learn how to correctly shoot them. Save those rounds for the revolution. Poor whites and blacks bum rushing the system. This quote speech, who I played this morning. This is not hard to figure out, and it ain't even a human issue. This might offend some of y'all because y'all like to believe that humans ain't animals. Y'all don't want to accept that humans are animals. But when you take rats, and you put them in a tight quarters. Now, first of all, rats tend to be communal creatures. But when you take rats and you put them in cramped conditions and give them substandard resources, they begin to attack each other. They begin to eat and consume their own babies. And they become more and more aggressively territorial. They start banging on each other. Same thing happens with chimpanzees. They find that chimpanzees that live in peaceful family groups, as deforestation comes, and they lose more and more of their habitat, and they get more and more surrounded by hostile humans, they start to attack and literally cannibalize each other and go to war with other chimpanzee. This is a natural phenomenon of the natural world. You're either going to be free and liberated, or you are going to be cannibalizing your own people, attacking your own. And some of us don't even go as far as to attack our own brothers and sisters. We begin to attack ourselves, consume toxic food, consume toxic music and culture, use toxic products, and commit a slow, steady suicide of killing ourselves. So submitting to oppression isn't just about being disrespected by whites and being controlled and exploited by whites. It also creates a high probability that your own people will begin to attack you, or you will attack your own damn people. That's what happens to A Dream Deferred. Go look up that poem, read that poem, and understand that all of that is what's happening to us. And when by dream, our revolution, our dream of liberation, our dream of justice, our dream of being whole and complete people has been deferred. So we are drying up like a raisin in the sun. We are festering and running like an open wound. We stink like rotten meat. We are sagging. We are under a heavy load, and we often, very often, we explode. So we need to make that dream a real reality. Every time we do revolution, they say, if you do revolution, people are going to die. If you do revolution, people are going to get locked up. But guess what? We had higher homicide rates and higher incarceration rates when we submit the oppressor than when we fight the oppressor. So don't look at what's going on in South Africa like the media is saying those crazy Africans just can't get along. Oh, tribal warfare. That is not tribal warfare. It's not even xenophobia. It is a deferred revolution. And support the EF under Malema. Support the economic freedom fighters of South Africa because they are the only party. Connect, watch, support, solidarity. The ANC, no more. Mandela, no more. It's the EFF, and the EFF leadership is the only viable solution for South Africa. And black Pan-Africanism and Pan-African revolution, revolutionary Pan-Africanism is the only solution for African people anywhere you find African people on the face of this earth. This is the Bro Diallo Show. Q4 Radio, AM 1680. You can also listen to Q4 Radio on the TuneIn app, iTunes Radio, or q4.org. Please help to sustain the Bro Diallo show. This is not a vanity project. I will not be here if the people do not demonstrate demonstrate the fact that they want me here. I'm here for the people. I do this show for the people, and thus the people must support this show. Please go to Patreon. Please make a one-time donation. Go to diallokenyatta.com. Reach out to me directly if you have skills, time, volunteer, whatever you have to help contribute to Pan-African revolutionary independent media, because I will go off the air before I start to talk nonsense and tell my people anything less than the unmitigated truth, as unpleasant as it may be. So I'll never be popular. I'll never be viral. But I don't want to be viral. I want to be health. I want to be vibrant. And sometimes you don't get a big audience, but I appreciate the few of you who do listen. But please become an active listener. If you don't have resources to support, please just at least go subscribe to the YouTube, share the page, get the word out about the Bro Diallo show and the Q4 network. You know, share this show, share the programs, share the links, the live broadcasts or the archive shows with your friends, lovers, enemies, and allies. We're going to have a little bit more music, and we're going to hear a little bit about the true South African. Like Del Jones said, Mandela was a trump card. They knew that Steve Biko would never sell out, so they killed him immediately. But they put Mandela on ice. And they trained up Mandela to betray the very revolution he spent almost 3 decades in jail fighting for. But don't look at anything from the surface. Understand the history behind all things. Bro Diallo Show, Q4 Radio. This is the other in the sunshine, Arrested Development.